Have you ever been in love with an ex so much that the moment you find yourself around him, you become totally vulnerable, too weak to resist him, and completely ignore all the consequences your actions might cost? Because who would have thought I'd be the kind of woman to be this reckless and wild? A woman who will thoughtlessly hurt an innocent man who has provided for me and shown me loyalty and trust, to betray the one person who had been nothing but good to me. But here I am, staring at myself in the mirror, struggling to recognize the woman looking back at me. I can still feel the heat of his hands on my skin, the lingering scent of his cologne tangled in my hair. And the worst part? I don't even know how to feel about it. Regret? Guilt? Or the terrifying realization that I don't want it to be the last time? Before I go any further, I need to be honest with you. And I mean completely honest. My name is Angela Whitman. I'm 34 years old, and I am a mother of 2 beautiful kids. I live in Los Angeles, California. I've been married to Marcus Whitman for 10 years, and by all standards, he's an amazing husband. He's hardworking, loving, and stable. Everything a woman should want. And yet, I did the abominable. I know what you're thinking. How could I? Why would I risk everything? Trust me, I've been asking myself the same thing over and over again. But the truth is, sometimes, desire is louder than reason. And just one reckless night changed everything. And that is why I decided to come to the LC community to seek help. Guys, I need your help. I don't want judgment. I already hate myself enough. What I do need is your honest, unbiased advice. What should I do now? Should I beg for a second chance or just move on? Is there something I can do to fix this? Is there even anything left to fix? I'll be in the comments, reading your thoughts, and trying to make sense of my next move with your unbiased suggestions and advice. But before I tell you everything from the very beginning, I need you to kindly hit the like button to enable this video to reach more people in order to get varying opinions and the best available advice from the LC family. Thanks as you do that. It all started on a Wednesday night. The kind of night where exhaustion clings to your bones, and you start questioning the life you've built for yourself. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my untouched plate of dinner, while Marcus sat across from me, scrolling through emails on his phone. It was silent, except for the occasional sound of his spoon clinking against the bowl of soup I had barely eaten. "Long day, huh?" he asked absently, still staring at his screen. I nodded, even though I knew he wasn't really looking for an answer. This was us now, a routine, predictable, safe couple. We talked about schedules, bills, and the kids' school projects, but we hadn't really talked in years. I took a sip of wine, hoping the warmth would settle something in me, but it didn't. Instead, it only made me more aware of the suffocating emptiness in my chest. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Gina. "Girl, you need a break. Come out tonight. Luster Lounge, 9 p.m. No excuses." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. I should have said no. I should have told her I was too tired, that I had responsibilities. But I didn't. Instead, I glanced up at Marcus, who still hadn't looked away from his emails, and something inside me snapped. I typed back one word. "Fine." The moment I hit send, I felt the first thrill of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. Gina sent the address. Luster Lounge, downtown LA. I had never been there before, but I had heard of it. Exclusive, elegant, discreet. A place where people went to escape their real lives for a few hours. As I got dressed, I told myself it was just a night out with my best friend. Nothing more. But deep down, a part of me knew better. Maybe I wasn't just looking for fun. Maybe I was looking for a way out. The night air in downtown Los Angeles was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and whispered secrets. When I walked into Luster Lounge, I felt the first spark of excitement I had missed for so long. The place reeked of exclusivity, gold-trimmed bar counters, glass chandeliers casting a dim, romantic glow, and the sound of laughter mingling with the clinking of crystal glasses. And then I saw him, Daniel Pierce, and my breath hitched. He was my ex, my biggest mistake, my deepest temptation. Daniel wasn't just a man from my past. He was the man who had ruined me for all other men. The one who had made me feel alive in ways Marcus never could. Tall, devastatingly handsome, with that arrogant smirk that used to drive me wild. He was the kind of man women regretted, but never forgot. And there he was, standing at the bar, sipping whiskey like he owned the room. It wasn't just his looks. It was the way he carried himself. Confident, powerful, like nothing in the world could touch him. Daniel was a venture capitalist, a high-rolling, risk-taking billionaire who had built an empire from the ground up. He didn't just buy companies, he devoured them. The kind of man who made deals over million-dollar stakes and slept in five-star penthouses just because he could. And tonight, he was here. The same event, the same bar. Fate? Coincidence? Or just a dangerous game I wasn't ready to play? I turned to Gina, forcing a casual tone. What kind of event is this again? She sipped her cocktail, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Some charity thing. The LA Investment Forum is hosting. Rich guys flexing their bank accounts in the name of philanthropy. Of course. That's why Daniel was here. I should have walked away. But I didn't. Instead, he smirked and raised his glass in acknowledgement from a little distance, as if he had been expecting me. And just like that, I was drowning again. My body remembered him before my mind could protest, and the moment our eyes locked, it was like being pulled into a current I had no strength to resist. Angela, he murmured when he was close enough that his breath brushed against my skin. I thought I'd never see you again. I swallowed hard, gripping my glass tighter. Neither did I. Yet here we are, he mused, his eyes roaming over me, lingering just long enough to make my skin heat. Still as breathtaking as ever. I exhaled sharply, trying to gather the scattered pieces of my common sense. You're flattering me, Daniel. His lips curved. Am I? Or am I just reminding you of the truth? I hated how my body reacted to him, hated how the old memories resurfaced so easily, his hands gripping my waist, his mouth tracing fire along my neck, the way he made me feel alive. I had spent years burying him, and yet, with one look, he had unearthed it all. Gina, oblivious to the hurricane brewing inside me, nudged me playfully. Wait, you two know each other? Daniel chuckled, his gaze never leaving mine. Oh, we go way back. Come have a drink with me, he said, his voice a low challenge. I should have said no. Instead, I followed him. The VIP lounge was dimly lit, tucked away from the rest of the club like a secret waiting to be kept. We sat in a corner booth, an air of familiarity and danger wrapping around us like smoke. The more we talked, the more I felt myself slipping. Every laugh, every lingering glance, every brush of his fingers against my wrist sent me spiraling into the past. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I let my body betray me. You ever think about us? He asked, his voice dipping into something darker, something I knew all too well. I should have lied. Sometimes, I admitted. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. Good, because I haven't stopped thinking about you. A shiver ran down my spine. This was dangerous, reckless, wrong. And yet, when he reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't pull away. His touch was a whisper of something forbidden, something that promised fire if I let it consume me. Daniel was close, too close, his scent intoxicating, a mix of whiskey, sandalwood, and something unmistakably masculine, the kind of scent that made my knees feel weak, that made me forget the 10 years of marriage I had wrapped around my finger. The club felt smaller now, like the world had shrunk into just the two of us. The hum of conversation, the clinking glasses, the sensual bass vibrating under my heels, it all blurred into white noise. His fingers once again brushed my wrist, deliberate and slow. A simple touch, yet it sent a rush of electricity through me. Come with me, he murmured, his voice just low enough that only I could hear. I should have said no. Instead, I whispered, Where? His smirk deepened, dark amusement dancing in his eyes. Somewhere we don't have to pretend. Pretend? That word clung to me. That's what I'd been doing for years, wasn't it? Pretending to be happy, pretending to be satisfied, pretending that the warmth in my marriage hadn't turned to routine, and for once, I didn't want to pretend. I followed him. Gina was too distracted to notice as we slipped past the velvet ropes and toward the elevators. The ride up was silent, but thick with tension. He stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. My pulse hammered. My body screamed warnings that my mind ignored. When the doors opened, we stepped into the dimly lit hallway of the Four Seasons Beverly Hills. His suite was on the top floor. Presidential. Of course it was. He swiped his keycard, the green light blinking, "Go ahead. Ruin yourself." And I did. The second the door clicked shut, he was on me. His hands were in my hair, my back pressed against the cool marble wall, his mouth crushed against mine, hungry, demanding, relentless. I should have stopped it. I should have remembered who I was and who I belonged to. But all I could think about was how much I had missed this. The heat, the urgency, the way he devoured me like he had been starving for years. I moaned into his mouth, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer when I should have been pushing him away. "Tell me you don't want this," he growled against my lips. I couldn't, because it would have been a lie. The hotel suite was a blur of heat and recklessness. Clothes hit the floor, fingers traced old maps of forgotten territories, and when he finally took me, it was like a collision, fire meeting gasoline. It wasn't soft, it wasn't gentle. It was wild, messy, unrestrained. I lost myself in him, in the way his hands knew exactly where to touch me, the way his body moved against mine like he was reclaiming something he thought was his. And for those hours in that bed, I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't responsible. I was just a woman who had made the biggest mistake of her life. The sun was ruthless when it streamed through the curtains the next morning, slapping me awake with the reality of what I had done. I blinked against the light, my head pounding, my body aching in ways I hadn't felt in years. Daniel was still asleep beside me. He was breathing deeply, his arm lazily draped over my waist. I stared at the ceiling. This was real. This happened. A sick wave of guilt churned in my stomach. I needed to leave. Now. Carefully, I slipped out of bed, gathering my dress, my heels, my shame. I dressed quickly, my hands trembling as I tried to steady my breath. My wedding ring felt heavier on my finger like a weight dragging me into the ground. I glanced at Daniel one last time. Even asleep, he looked like trouble. I never should have come here. I slipped out of the suite without another word. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every red light was a moment to think, and I didn't want to think. I didn't want to face what I had done. What was I supposed to say when I walked through the door? "Good morning, honey. I just spent the night betraying you." I pulled into the driveway of our 2-story home in Silver Lake, the sight of it making my chest tighten. The place where we raised our children. The place where Marcus kissed me every morning before work. The place where I had stood just hours ago, feeling empty. And now? Now I was full of something else. Regret, shame, and the terrifying knowledge that one night wasn't enough. I stepped inside. The scent of coffee filled the kitchen, warm and familiar, but I felt like an intruder in my own life. Marcus was there, standing by the counter in his gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, flipping through the morning paper like he always did. His eyes lifted when I walked in, soft, trusting. "Morning, baby," he said, sipping his coffee. "Sleep well?" My throat tightened. I forced a smile. "Yeah." A lie. A remorseful, rehearsed, and precise lie. I pressed a kiss to his cheek, pretending like nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had changed. And the worst part? This wasn't over. The next few days were a blur of pretending. Pretending to be the same wife, the same mother, the same woman Marcus thought he knew. But a text came. From Daniel. Each one was a reminder of what I had done. Each one a temptation to do it again. I read them in secret, my pulse racing every time his name lit up my phone. And before I could even stop myself, I texted back. Because the truth? I didn't want to stop. I should have deleted the messages. I should have blocked his number. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, staring at my phone screen, my thumb hovering over his last text. "Don't tell me you regret it," says the message sent by Daniel. "You know where to find me." It had been 3 days since that night at the Four Seasons, and I had spent every second of those days pretending to be the devoted wife, the doting mother, the woman who didn't just destroy everything she built for a night of reckless passion. But the worst part? I wasn't pretending for Marcus. I was pretending for myself. Because every time I closed my eyes, I wasn't thinking about my husband. I was thinking about Daniel, the way his fingers gripped my waist, the way his voice commanded me, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I exhaled sharply, tossing my phone onto the bed like it was burning me. This has to stop. It has to stop. But deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't want it to. That night, Marcus and I were having dinner in our Silver Lake home, and the atmosphere between us was eerily normal. The kids were in the living room, watching some Disney movies, while Marcus talked about his day at the firm. I nodded at the right times, smiled at the right moments, but I wasn't there. I was somewhere else, with someone else. And then, right as I'm about to close the deal, the guy decides he wants to renegotiate. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "I swear, some clients think lawyers are miracle workers." I forced a laugh, swallowing a bite of pasta I could barely taste. "Sounds frustrating." His gaze flickered to mine then, studying me too closely. "Yeah." He paused. "Kind of like talking to you tonight." My stomach dropped. Shit. I put down my fork. "What do you mean?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You're somewhere else, Angela." I opened my mouth to protest, to feed him some carefully crafted excuse. But before I could say anything, my phone buzzed. And in that 1 second, I knew I had messed up. Because I flinched. Marcus's eyes flicked to my phone, sitting face down on the table. Silence. Tension. My pulse thundered as I reached for it, too fast, flipping it over and hitting the power button before the screen could light up. Too late. Marcus set his wine glass down slowly, never looking away. "Who was that?" I forced a casual smile. "Gina." A lie. A lie that came too easily. Marcus nodded slowly, but his expression told me he didn't believe me. I cleared my throat, standing up, grabbing my plate as an excuse to walk away. "I'm gonna put the kids to bed," I muttered. Marcus said nothing, but I felt his eyes burning into my back the entire way upstairs. I barely made it into the bedroom before checking my phone. It was Daniel. "You're thinking about me. I can feel it," said Daniel. "I'll be at my penthouse. Midnight." I exhaled shakily, gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. This was it. This was the moment I should have ended it. I should have ignored him. I should have crawled into bed next to Marcus and fought the urge to self-destruct. But instead, I typed back. "I can't," I replied. I hit send. I waited. My heart was pounding, my breath shallow. Then, 3 dots appeared. And then, it was Daniel's text. "Yes, you can," he texted, and he added, "Don't make me wait, Angela." I squeezed my eyes shut. I hated him. I hated how easily he got inside my head. I hated how he was right. Because why would a grown-ass woman like me be sneaking out of her matrimonial home at exactly 11:45 p.m.? I was slipping into a tight black dress, grabbing my keys, and sneaking out of my own house like a teenager breaking curfew. The Regent Beverly Wilshire was nothing short of luxury. A high-rise glass tower overlooking Rodeo Drive, dripping in elegance and excess. The kind of place where secrets were whispered in dimly lit hallways, where affairs thrived behind locked doors. By the time I reached his penthouse on the 30th floor, my body was on fire. Not from lust, from guilt, from knowing that this was the moment I officially crossed a line I could never come back from. The door opened before I could even knock. Daniel stood there, leaning against the frame, his eyes pulling me in before his hands even touched me. "You came," he murmured, the barest hint of a smirk on his lips. I swallowed. "I shouldn't have." "But you did," he says. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. And just like that, I was gone. I don't know how long I stayed, minutes, hours, a lifetime. All I know is that when I finally pulled away from him, breathless and tangled in silk sheets, my world was already in ruins. My marriage was a house on fire, and I had been the one holding the match. The morning after, I barely made it home before Marcus woke up. I crept into the bedroom, my pulse hammering, slipping beneath the covers beside him. For a moment, I thought I was safe. I thought I had gotten away with it. But then, "Where were you?" His voice was calm, too calm. My entire body went cold. I swallowed hard, my mind scrambling for a lie, a way out. "I went to Gina's. Marcus turned over then, and the way he looked at me made my blood freeze. He knew. He knew. He just wasn't saying it. Not yet. His eyes searched mine, dark and unreadable, before he finally whispered, "Are you sleeping with someone else, Angela?" My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and for the first time since this all started, I couldn't lie. His question hung in the air, suffocating. "Are you sleeping with someone else, Angela?" I had never hated silence more than in that moment. I could hear my heartbeat. I could feel the weight of his stare. Marcus already knew the answer, but he wanted to hear it from me. My lips parted, but nothing came out. Lie. My brain screamed at me. Lie. Deny. Say something. But I couldn't. Not this time. Because when I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made my stomach drop to my feet. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't demanding the truth. He was waiting for me to confirm his worst fear. And that shattered me more than anything. Tears burned the back of my eyes as I whispered the truth that could never be taken back. "I'm sorry." Marcus exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. His fingers curled into the sheets like he was clawing for control. "For how long?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I felt sick. "It doesn't matter," I started, but he cut me off. "How long?" I swallowed hard. "A few weeks." The smallest muscle in his jaw twitched. "And before that?" I hesitated. Marcus blinked once, slowly. And that was when I knew. He had been watching me, waiting. He already had proof. I covered my mouth as if that could stop the sob that ripped from my chest. "Marcus, please." He shook his head, sitting up and swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. "Don't. Not now." His voice was so empty that it barely sounded like him. I watched in horror as he stood up and walked to the closet, pulling out a duffel bag. What are you doing?" My voice broke. "Leaving," he said simply. Panic exploded in my chest. "Marcus, no. Please, let's talk. We can fix this." He finally turned, looking at me with an expression so foreign, so cold, I barely recognized the man I had once loved. "Fix this?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Angela, you burned this to the ground. You don't fix ashes." My stomach churned violently. "I was going to tell you," I whispered. "I wanted to. You wanted to?" he repeated, his voice sharp. "So what? You just didn't get around to it?" Between the lying and the sneaking around, you ran out of time? I winced. Marcus stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then, in a voice so calm it was terrifying, he said, "I don't even know who you are anymore." And then, he walked out. That should have been it. That should have been my breaking point. But it wasn't. Because 2 days later, I was in Daniel's penthouse, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets, my nails trailing down his bare chest. Did he cry? Daniel's voice was mocking, his fingers grazing my hip. I tensed. "Don't." Daniel smirked, rolling onto his side, his head propped up on his hand. "Don't what?" He traced the outline of my lips with his thumb. "Act like this wasn't inevitable?" My eyes flashed. "I didn't want this to happen." "Didn't you?" His lips brushed my jaw, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You could have stayed home. You could have deleted my number. But you didn't, Angela. You came to me." I closed my eyes, guilt choking me. Because he was right. I had nowhere else to go. I had destroyed my home, and Daniel was the only thing left. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I let him consume me. I let him own me. Because at least with him, I didn't have to pretend anymore. 3 weeks later, I was served with divorce papers. It was over. No dramatic confrontation, no yelling, no fights over who gets the house. Just a single envelope on the kitchen counter, waiting for me like a gravestone. Marcus was done. And for the first time since this started, I felt the full weight of what I had done. The man who had loved me, who had built a life with me, was walking away forever. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. With all honesty, I still didn't know why I did it. I still don't know why I allowed Daniel to set my world on fire. Maybe I wanted to feel alive. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I thought Marcus would never find out. But in the end, every lie catches up to you. And when it does, it doesn't just ruin your life. It ruins you. So to every person watching this, is the moment worth the damage? Because if I could do it all over again, I would have walked away from Daniel and never looked back. 3 months later, I never thought it would feel this way. The silence, the emptiness, the finality of it all. When Marcus left, I expected to feel relief. I thought that maybe, deep down, I had wanted this, that some part of me had been waiting for an escape. But the truth? The truth is worse. Because now that he's really gone, I feel nothing but regret. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment now, tucked away on the west side of LA. It's small. It's quiet. It's temporary. The kids stay with Marcus during the week. I see them on weekends. It's the only time I feel human again. The rest of the week, I exist in a loop of work, wine, and silence. I thought I could fill the void with Daniel. I thought he would be enough. I was wrong. I told you this would happen. Daniel's voice is unapologetic, his hands tucked into his pockets as he leans against my kitchen counter. I stare at him, exhaustion heavy in my bones. And yet, here you are. My voice is flat, empty. He smirks. Of course I am, because you don't have anyone else. I let out a breathy laugh, but there's no humor in it. You enjoy this, don't you? I murmur. Watching me burn. Daniel steps closer, tilting his head. I enjoy knowing I was right. Right about what? His fingers brush my jaw, his voice dropping. That I was always going to be the one you ran to. I close my eyes, willing myself not to break. Because I know he's right. He was always going to be the mistake I couldn't walk away from. But the problem with burning bridges? You don't get to cross them again. And when Daniel kisses me that night, it doesn't feel like passion. It feels like settling. 2 weeks later, I see Marcus for the first time since the divorce was finalized. It's a Saturday afternoon, and I'm waiting in my car outside his house, watching the kids race to pack up their things. The front door opens, and there he is, Marcus Whitman. The man who once looked at me like I was his whole world, now looks at me like I'm a stranger. For a brief second, our eyes meet. He doesn't smile, he doesn't frown, he just nods. And then, he turns away, and that's when it hits me. This is my life now. Marcus isn't mine anymore. He never will be again. And that is a pain I will never recover from. If you're still here, then maybe you're hoping I'll say something profound, something that explains it all. But the truth, there is no explanation. There is no justification. There's just the wreckage of what I destroyed. I lost my husband. I lost my family. And in the end, I lost myself. So to every person watching this, if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of temptation, ask yourself one thing. Is this moment worth a lifetime of regret? Because trust me, it never is. And if the LC community thinks there's still a way for me to get a second chance to have my life back, I won't hesitate to give it a shot. Please, drop your thoughts in the comments section below. I'll be there to get all I can get.